Welcome to Energetic Advantage, the podcast where energy isn't woo, it's your edge. I'm your host, Jessica Serrato, intuitive strategist, lifelong pattern decoder, lover of numbers, and energetic guide for visionary leaders. Around here, we go energy first, strategy second. Every episode will give you a perspective, a tool, or a timeline shift that helps you lead from your power. Because the truth is, your energy is your most undervalued asset until you learn how to use it. Get ready, you're about to have the advantage. Let's begin. Okay, we're gonna get right into it today, and I'm gonna share something slightly controversial. Hierarchy is mostly an hallucination. Hierarchy is definitely not structure. It's not leadership. It's not about roles. Hierarchy is this idea that some humans are inherently above other humans. And once we really trace where this word comes from, and once we start noticing how things actually are functioning in real life, we are going to realize that we've been participating in a story that isn't as nearly as solid as it looks. And when we dissolve that story, when we dissolve hierarchy, it is one of the fastest ways to unlock collaboration, leadership, and results. So let's get right into it. You know, the word hierarchy comes from the Greek language, hieros meaning sacred, and arche meaning rule or order. So originally, hierarchy had nothing to do with these corporate ladders, right? It described a sacred order. It was used to rank angels, to structure religious authority, to organize who mediated between these humans and the divine. So the original purpose of hierarchy was organizing access to power. And from there, it moved into monarchies, into military systems, into governments, and eventually into corporations. And listen, you've heard me say this before. Structure is not bad. Clarity is not bad. Decision rights are not bad. But somewhere along the way, we made a mistake. We stopped using hierarchy to organize roles, and we started using it to measure human worth. And that is where the distortion begins. So if you've ever worked inside a corporation, you know exactly what I'm talking about. There's the org chart. You know, those boxes with the lines in between and the titles, vice president, director, manager, associate. It looks really neat. It looks really ordered and logical. But everyone inside the company knows that that org chart that is so proudly displayed on the website or the intraweb or paper is not the real org chart. The real org chart is who the CEO actually listens to, who influences decisions in these side conversations, who can walk into a room and shift the direction of a project, who everyone calls when something actually needs to get done. You know, I used to laugh because in a previous role, my CEO would constantly say, "Go ask the boss." And he meant his assistant. On paper, he had the highest title, but in reality, she controlled the calendar, the access, and the information flow. So power and position are not the same thing. And we all know this. But we still sometimes pretend like these boxes are real. And if you're listening and you're like, but wait, Jess, I'm not in corporate. I am an entrepreneur. I became an entrepreneur to escape this hierarchy. Sorry, no, you didn't. Entrepreneurship likes to pretend that it dissolved hierarchy, but it didn't. It just replaced titles with something else. And so let's take one of those something else's as an example. So entrepreneurship replaced titles with revenue. So now it's 7-figure businesses, 8-figure businesses, $10 million launches. We created a new ranking system. And you know what's interesting is that I support people running 8-figure companies while running a multi-6-figure business myself. If hierarchy worked the way people think it does, that wouldn't make sense. But we know mentorship doesn't flow from revenue. It flows from clarity, from pattern recognition, from perspective. And, there are rooms where I hold the most authority energetically. And there are rooms where I'm absolutely the student, and neither threatens the other. And that's the point. This is where you can really create expansion in your life and your business, when you can flow between these two, not follow the hierarchy that is there. So let me give you a real life example from my world. So Chelsea, who you've heard on the podcast before, originally came into the world as a client. We did deep strategy work together, big energetic shifts. And then later, I hired her as my hormone health specialist. So in one context, I'm the mentor, and in another context, I'm the client. But there's no weirdness, there's no ego, there's no, oh, who outranks who? It's so clean. You lead here and I lead here. And I think this is part of why I get the results I do, and why my clients also get the results they do. Because we are wasting no energy trying to be above someone else. And I'm also not shrinking below someone either. Hierarchy creates this energetic leakage, whereas these ecosystems create momentum. And, I see this so much in my work, and I just had to laugh. Last week was so funny. I had a call with someone supporting me at 11:30 to 12:30. And then at 12:30, we just changed Zoom rooms, and she had a call with me where I was supporting her. And this is, again, when there's no hierarchy, when you don't have this above and below thinking, you can really go beyond, right, what is possible in a relationship. So when we think of hierarchical, it's a hard word to say, thinking, it quietly creates a lot of problems, because in some ways it makes people stay quiet because they're like, well, it's not my place to say this. It has people overperforming because they feel like they have something to prove. In some ways, people refuse help because they think they should already know, or the person who they could really use some help with is perhaps less experienced or quote unquote underneath them. And therefore they dismiss this insight from someone younger or less credentialed. I've seen this so many times, where executives ignore brilliant ideas because they come from someone lower in the org. Entrepreneurs refusing mentorship because the person earns less than they do, or only wanting mentorship from that one factor of hierarchy and missing out on the beautiful support that they have all around them. People holding back their voice because someone else has a bigger title. Hierarchy freezes intelligence. And so I want to go through some of the myths that I hear a lot, and let's bust them. Let's do a myth busting segment. So the first myth is, well, if there's no hierarchy, there's chaos. Because whenever people hear dissolve hierarchy, they immediately imagine chaos, right? If there's no hierarchy, who makes the decisions? Who's accountable? Doesn't everything fall apart? No. Hierarchy and order are not the same thing. I'm going to say that again. Hierarchy and order are not the same thing. Hierarchy ranks humans. Order creates clarity. We absolutely need order, but we do not need ranking. So another myth is, well, without hierarchy, there's no accountability. I would say that actually rigid hierarchy often kills accountability, because everyone assumes that someone above them will handle it. And in healthy systems, accountability becomes very clear and very local. You own this, I own that. Here's where we collaborate. Most chaos in companies does not come from too little hierarchy. It comes from unclear authority. Chaos happens when people don't know who decides, who contributes, who executes. That's confusion. And so clarity actually dissolves that chaos, whereas hierarchy actually promotes chaos. The other myth that I hear is, well, like someone has to be in charge. Yes, yes. And being in charge is not the same thing as being above someone. So leadership can be situational. Think about, like a surgical team in the medical world, right? During surgery, the surgeon leads. But if there's a complication with the anesthesia, then the anesthesiologist leads. Why am I choosing all of these hard words to pronounce today? Nobody panics. Nobody questions the shift. No one's saying, oh, who should lead now? Energetically, authority moves to where the expertise is. And that is order without ego. And it's the same thing in sports, right? The quarterback calls the play, yes. But the best teams adapt in real time because leadership moves through the system. And these healthy systems are responsive, not rigid. Another myth, flattening hierarchy means no structure. No, it just means structure without ego. So you can absolutely say, I make the final call here without meaning I am more valuable than you. A hierarchy confuses authority with superiority. And when we're in healthy leadership, we can separate them. So I want you to think into your life, into your work. And if you are holding on to hierarchy because you think it protects order or structure, I'm going to gently suggest something to you. It might actually be protecting your ego. Because hierarchy can be very convenient, right? If you're at the top, it protects your authority. And if you're at the bottom, it protects you from responsibility. But real leadership is fluid. And that fluid leadership requires maturity. And so when hierarchy dissolves, leadership does not disappear. It becomes an ecosystem leadership. So power moves where it's needed, roles shift based on the expertise, contribution becomes so much more important than rank. In one room, you're the teacher. In another room, you're the beginner. In another, you might be a connector or a catalyst. That's not instability. That's not being wishy-washy. That is maturity. And so what does this actually look like in real life? I'm going to give you some very tangible, specific tips to dissolve hierarchy in your life right now. The first thing I want you to do is separate the role from your identity. And this role can be your position at work, but it could also be your position in the family. So whether this is director of marketing or VP of sales or mom or daughter or whatever, you are not your title. You are inhabiting a role. And so how can you bring you as a person, your identity in that role, not allow yourself to become that role? The second thing I want you to do is normalize reciprocal mentorship. Ask the question, where do you lead? Where do I lead? And find places where there is this reciprocity in energy, this true collaboration. Third, I want you to reward contribution, not position or seniority. The best idea wins, hands down. And again, I'm laughing because I can think of so many examples, not only in my work life, but in my family life, right? Where we don't let the oldest decide, we go with the best idea. The fourth thing is, I want you to make informal power visible. I want you to name the real influencers in the room and see if you can energetically attune to them based on their energy, not their position or their title. And the fifth, I want you to be willing to be the student publicly. This dissolves ego instantly. And lastly, if you're in the entrepreneur space, I want you to stop using revenue as a spiritual ranking system. Money is data, right? It is a beautiful resource, and it's one that helps us, it's a resource, just like time, just like energy. And so it can really help us expand, but it does not mean anything about a person. It's simply data. And once we know that data, we can make changes to get more of it, if that's what you're wanting. So, right now, this energy is front and center. We are moving into a leadership era that cannot function on rigid hierarchy. Innovation does not come from the top down. It comes from distributed intelligence. The most powerful organizations I've seen are fluid. And the most powerful people I work with, they are never trying to climb above someone. They are building rooms where everyone stands fully. There's no throne, there's no pedestal, there's no invisible ranking system humming under the surface. There is clarity, there is contribution, there is exchange. So here's a question I want to leave you with. Where might you still be operating inside an invisible ladder? Where might you be shrinking because someone has a bigger title? Where are you posturing because you think you are supposed to be ahead? And what would change if you saw every room as this ecosystem instead? Remember back to the origin of the word. Hierarchy was originally about sacred order. And dissolving it is not about tearing anything down. It's about remembering that worth was never up for ranking in the first place. Leadership in this year of the visionary leader is knowing exactly where you stand without needing anyone else to kneel. So here's to the visionary leaders, the ones who will really innovate and embrace and up-level humanity in a way that can be only done together in 2026. I know if you're listening to this podcast, you are one of the visionary leaders, and I'm so grateful you're here. Thanks for being here inside the Energetic Advantage. If today's episode opened something for you, share it, tag it, or send it to the person who popped into your mind. And remember, energy first, strategy second. Your advantage has always been in you. Now it's time to lead with it. See you next time.